Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Friday, April 4th, 2025, and Jagmeet Singh fires his OnlyFans model and trades in for domination dogs, furries. I'm not exactly sure what he was trading in for there, but it's weird, and I didn't like it, and I'll show you the picture. At first, I dismissed it as not real, but I think it is real, and a whole lot of people are sharing it, and it's weird. It's very, very strange. Tamara Litch and Chris Barber, we're going to start there, and they beat 5 of the 6 charges. They were found guilty for mischief, but everything else was thrown out, so that's very interesting. I'm glad. It seems like that's an okay outcome, not perfect, but not as bad as it could have been. I don't know what their sentence is yet. So, and I thought it was going to be announced yesterday, but I haven't seen any news about what their sentence is. So I'll tell you when I find out, but I don't know. Orban wants Hungary out of the International Criminal Court. I'll show that to you later in the show. And Trump unveils his gold card. Joly suspends her campaign to do diplomacy about tariffs, and they want to closely align with France and Germany. And that's, not something that I want to. Not something that I want to do. I watched the whole Le Pen thing. I watched what they're doing in Germany, trying to get rid of the ADF, et cetera, and having Canada tied closer with Europe while ignoring the United States or burning that relationship to the ground is not something I'm interested in. And it's over this time, the United States, says Mark Carney. This time I mean it. Canada's calling up the United States in the middle of the night, crying and sobbing and saying, I can't believe you'd do this to me. It's over again. And then hanging up and then hoping that the United States is going to call back. It's ridiculous and it's silly. And Mark Carney doesn't have, well, he's supposed to be part of the Caretaker government, not making all of these big changes. And so there are problems with what's going on. And so there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, we've got to start with the Freedom Convoy verdict. And CTV News is saying, Freedom Convoy organizers Tamara Litch, Chris Barber found guilty of mischief. And that's the only thing that they were found guilty of, though. So CTV News is doing these big headlines, but there's more to this story, right? Robert says, Tamara Litch never told her followers to make things more difficult for the police, just as Heather Perkins McVeigh said. She noted that both Litch and Chris Barber repeatedly called on Freedom Convoy protesters to be respectful towards and compliant with police. Justice Perkins McVeigh finds both Chris Barber and Tamara Litch not guilty of the charges of obstruction of police and counseling others to obstruct police. So that's all very interesting. And here's Right Blend. He says, Tamara Litch and Chris Barber found not guilty of obstruction, counts 3 and 4 of the indictment. Let's go. Chris and Tamara have beaten 5 of the 6 charges so far. And so it looks really good for them. Like, I think that there's a good thing. There's a chance that the Crown is going to appeal. They've appealed Pat King's verdict as well. But all of this is pretty good. And again, I don't know what I don't know what the sentence is. So we'll see what the sentence is. But I can't imagine more than time served at this point in time, right? So I'm glad to be wrong. I was worried that they were going to get a stiff sentence because they wanted to make an example out of these people. And the length of the trial, all of that, these people have paid dearly, both monetarily and emotionally and everything like that. And they're innocent. In another configuration, these people would be leaders. And in this configuration, unfortunately, our crooked system, our completely compromised institutions are cracking down on people who are trying to fight back against COVID tyranny and other types of tyranny too. And Western Standard highlights the hypocrisy. Anti-Israel rioters occupy McGill. These people are not being charged with mischief? Weird, right? There's video of groups of people running through, and what's being said here is McGill University has descended into complete chaos as Islamists have begun physically taking over the campus, including buildings. Riot police have started moving in as students are unable to get to class for fear of their safety. So riot police are moving in to take back control of Islamists who have wrested control of the campus. Isn't that wild? Do you think that's acceptable at a Canadian university in Quebec? Here's the riot police coming in. One guy can't believe it, right? Holy cow, he says. So pretty incredible. Anti-taxer says, look at this two-tier justice system in Canada. Tamara Litch and Chris Barber were found guilty of mischief for standing around. Meanwhile, protesters have taken over McGill campus, and there will not be a single arrest despite the precedent set today. Yeah, the precedent is if you stand up against the government, you're a problem, and they can throw you in jail and cause you to spend millions of dollars on your defense. But these people, realistically, these people have been paid by somebody to do this, right? And so they're protected. They're a protected class. Gov.exe says Tamara Litch and Chris Barber were found guilty of mischief, while the doctors and experts who supported lockdowns, vaccines, and mask mandates have yet to be held to account. Yeah, pretty crazy stuff happening there, right? It's nobody is actually being held accountable in a way that's appropriate. I think that it's really, really interesting. The only people who are being held accountable in any kind of way are the people who crossed Zexi Lee. And like, that's not acceptable. That's absolutely, in my opinion, a crooked institution that has been corrupted. And it doesn't represent, well, it's like, do you think Donald Trump is legitimately a criminal after he's been found guilty of these felonies in that crooked New York court, right? Like, I just don't think so. It doesn't hold the sway it used to, right? Where it used to be, you'd look at this and go, oh no. Right now it's like, well, it's kind of bullshit because the court is bullshit. Maxi, and the court doesn't want to be seen that way. It's when citizens don't respect the court, when citizens don't view it as a valid thing, that's a big problem, and they need to correct that. And they're not going to correct it, so they're just going to crack down on citizens who don't view the court as legitimate. Maxime Bernier says, it's disheartening to learn that two of the heroes of the Freedom Convoy, Tamara Litch and Chris Barber, have been found guilty of mischief in the longest and costliest trials in Canadian history. This was clearly a political witch hunt. Meanwhile, Trudeau and his ministers, who illegally invoked the Emergencies Act and violated basic rights, will go unpunished. Our justice system is corrupt to the bone. I don't disagree. I think that that's absolutely true. And Lion Advocacy says, after all of the trial, the Crown got them on a mischief charge. $10 million, 45 days of trial. This has got to be the worst use of court resources and taxpayer dollars in Canadian history. An absolute embarrassment and a shame on the Crown. So they spent a lot of money. They were going to make an example of these people, and then Trudeau got chased out, and now the Liberals are trying to save their skin. I don't think that necessarily played into Chris Barber and Tamara Litch's light sentence, if there's a sentence of anything at this point in time, or the verdict or anything like that. But I really feel strongly that if Trudeau was still the prime minister, and if whatever was in place, the circumstances were in place to keep him as a prime minister, then these two would have gotten a worse outcome than the situation we're in now. So maybe I'm wrong, but I'm glad that they were not handed a stiff. I'm glad that they were found not guilty for 5 of the 6, and we'll see what the verdict is when we see. Hopefully soon. We got to talk about tariffs. Tariffs are the big deal. Canada is trying to make the case that these tariffs have completely changed the world. The world has changed, and Canada is now going to lead the way on trade if the United States doesn't want to. And I think the United States, taking the steps that it took yesterday with regards to tariffs, counter tariffs, not allowing themselves to be, quote, taken advantage of, and honoring the trade deal between Canada, Mexico, and the United States, the USMCA, making it so that Canada is subject to some new rules. Like, there's certainly been changes, and it's certainly going to have an impact. I'm not saying that it's not, but the economy destroying auto sector, stuff like that has not happened, right? Steel tariffs, all that kind of stuff has happened, sure, and it needs a response. This happened last time Trump was in office. The difference now is, I think what Trump's doing is, and I've got some color on this later in the series of tabs here, talking about what Trump's goal actually is, but this is not, the tariffs aren't a goal in and of themselves. They're a move to a different way of doing business, and reshoring American jobs and manufacturing, and making sure that the United States and more broadly the West doesn't rely on long supply chains and China and foreign countries for their infrastructure and needs. And like, does that make sense? Yeah, if I'm an American taxpayer, I like that. That sounds good to me. And I think that it's very well worth it. Trump is also a master at communication. And I say that, but he's also been very, very bad with communication with regards to the tariffs, with regards to foreign countries, what they need to do specifically, so on and so forth. And I've complained about that, but also in the tab that I'm talking about that talks about what Trump's doing, the fog of war is being used by him. So the poor communication is a feature, not a bug. Okay, so it's being used by Trump as an advantage, and it makes sense, but I don't like it personally. Anyway, here's advertisement for the tariffs and for Liberation Day and for Trump, and this is U.S. Framed from a U.S. point of view, but I think it's informative anyway. So here we go.
This is one of the most important days. In my opinion.
It has been one day since Too Fast Talking incident has occurred. Here we go.
This is one of the most important days, in my opinion, American history. It's our declaration of economic independence. My fellow Americans, this is Liberation Day. April 2nd, 2025 will forever be remembered as the day American industry was reborn, the day America's destiny was reclaimed, and the day that we began to make America wealthy again. American steel workers, auto workers, farmers, and skilled craftsmen watched in anguish as foreign leaders have stolen our jobs, foreign cheaters have ransacked our factories, and foreign scavengers have torn apart our once beautiful American dream. Our country and its taxpayers have been ripped off for more than 50 years, but it is not going to happen anymore. We are finally putting America first. In a few moments, I will sign a historic executive order instituting reciprocal tariffs on countries throughout the world. We will supercharge our domestic industrial base. We will pry open foreign markets and break down foreign trade barriers. More production at home will mean stronger competition at lower prices. From this day on, we're not going to let anyone tell us that American workers and families cannot have the future that they deserve. We're going to produce the cars and ships, chips, airplanes, minerals, and medicines that we need right here in America. We're going to build our future with American hands, with American heart. This will be indeed the golden age of America.
There you go. So Trump White House talking about Liberation Day, Golden Age of America, and he's saying we're going to build what we need here. So, yeah, makes sense, right? He's been talking about that for months. GM Forbes is talking about Carney, and he's responding to Blacklock's reporter. Blacklock says feds will act with purpose and with force against Trump tariffs, but must keep their plan confidential from voters for now, Prime Minister tells reporters. Oh, trust us, vote us into office, and then we'll tell you how we're going to deal with this mean Trump guy that is an existential threat to our well-being. No, how about you tell us what you're going to do now? Hey, GM Forbes says Carney and his liberals, we have a plan to deal with Trump and his tariffs. Canadians, cool, what is it? Carney and liberals, you'll have to vote for us to find out. Yeah, I know. I don't think so. I don't think so. John's responding to Mackenzie Gray. Mackenzie says Prime Minister Carney has announced Canada is putting a 25% reciprocal tariff on U.S. autos imported into Canada that are not USMCA compliant. So these tariffs won't hit auto parts or content from Mexico. Huh. I couldn't name an American car that's imported that isn't covered under the USMCA. He says NAFTA, but John says, hello, raise $8 billion in revenue. Where exactly does he think the revenue will come from? Well, it would come from Canadian consumers. That's where Carney's idea is so profoundly stupid that I'm going to write the Oxford Dictionary and ask them to replace their definition of stupid with Carney's idea. So he's a dummy. I don't think that he's nearly as smart as they tell us he is. So here is Joe Warmington, and this is Mark Carney again being a terrible, terrible ex. This is calling up America at 3 a.m. And again, America picks up the phone and says, Canada? And Canada says, it's over. Again, it's over. We're done. And the U.S. just hangs up because they're like, we're done with this shit. We are done with this crap. Holy cow. Here's Mark Carney saying it's over. It's over the United States.
System of global trade anchored on the United States that Canada has relied on since the end of the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped to deliver prosperity for our country for decades, is over. Our old relationship of steadily deepening integration with the United States is over. The 80-year period when the United States embraced the mantle of global economic leadership, when it forged alliances rooted in trust and mutual respect, and champion the free and open exchange of goods and services is over. The system of global trade.
It's all over, says Mark Carney. And to combat that, he's going to pivot to purchasing things from Europe. Weird. Rex Glacier says, Carney doesn't remotely sound like a guy who's lived and worked in Canada. He sounds like a guy giving a speech at the EU or in China. And here is, I think this is another part of the same speech we just heard part of. Here we go.
The global economy is fundamentally different today than it was yesterday. The system of global trade anchored on the United States that Canada has relied on since the end of the Second World War, a system that, while not perfect, has helped to deliver prosperity for our country for decades, is over. Our old relationship of steadily deepening integration with the United States is over. The 80-year period when the United States embraced the mantle of global economic leadership, when it forged alliances rooted in trust and mutual respect, and championed the free and open exchange of goods and services, is over. Well, this is a tragedy. It is also the new reality.
This is right up there with climate change is real, right? Like, you have to tell us this is real. This is the new reality, says Mark Carney. The United States is our biggest, they're our biggest customer. They take 75% of our exports. It's over, you say? I just don't see the evidence.
We must respond.
And Mark Carney is known as a liar. Like, Mark Carney lies about everything. It doesn't even really have to matter. He just lies about it. Like Marco Mendicino, right? And so I don't believe him because he's got a bad track record of telling the truth. And so it's over. Believe me, that's reality. No, when people tell you, believe me, that's reality, you have to find reality for yourself. Nobody can tell you what reality is. You have to find that. People can give you markers. They can say, listen, here's some information that may help you come to a decision more firmly. If you know these things, you may be more firm in your choice of what to believe. But I can tell you, but you won't believe me. You have to find it on your own, right? Anyway, regardless of all of that, the reality that Mark Carney spins is fiction.
With both purpose and force. We are a free, sovereign, and ambitious country. We are masters in our own home.
I was going to play the Kramer clip where he comes over and says, I'm out. Here is, but I didn't. But I watched it and then I chuckled. Here is the guidelines on the conduct of ministers and ministers of state for the Caretaker Convention. Okay, so this is the Caretaker Convention from the Government of Canada website. And I just wanted to highlight what they're supposed to be doing, because ending the relationship between the United States and Canada and saying it over and over and like behaving the way Mark Carney's behaving, I don't think that that's included in the Caretaker Convention. Here's what it says. To the extent possible, however, governments actively following the dissolution of Parliament in matters of policy, expenditure, and appointments should be restricted to matters that are routine or non-controversial or urgent and in the public interest. Is destroying our relationship with the United States urgent and in the public interest? I would say not. Reversible by a new government without undue cost or disruption, and agreed to by opposition parties in those cases where consultation is appropriate. So I feel like, and this thing goes through like, what is a caretaker government? It says basically the government needs to operate while the next election decision-making is happening. And until the next election happens, the previous government is in charge, but they're in a caretaker position. So standard decision-making is done, and that's okay. But making decisions outside of that kind of routine, standard, non-controversial stuff is not seen as okay, unless it's urgent and in the public interest. And so they're trying to make this urgent and in the public interest by saying Trump is doing this and we have to respond to it urgently right now. But the fact is, like, nothing changed for Canada yesterday. Nothing changed really at all, or on the 2nd. When this all came into effect, nothing changed. The USMCA was still in effect. There's a lot broadly. There's a lot that is the same. And so responding this way seems really, really strange. And well, seems premeditated. The speech that Carney was giving could have been written prior to these things coming, prior to Trump rolling out what he's rolled out. And then it sounds like it's coordinated. It sounds like it's a coordinated response. And I wouldn't be surprised if it was a coordinated response, because Canada, EU, the United Kingdom, Australia, a whole bunch of places have a vested interest in the United States continuing to just give them money for free, right? And so like they want to make this as hard as possible, right? So we'll see. It's kind of akin to a child having a temper tantrum because they want a treat at the grocery store. And the right move is to pick up the child and walk out, right? Like, no treat for you, kid. Anyway, CTV News says, if the U.S. won't lead world trade, Canada will, says Mark Carney, launching counter tariffs. Live updates here. So yeah, he really does say this. And I think this is a different part, even though I felt it was acceptable to watch the expanded version of what we just watched. I think this is different than what we just watched twice. Here we go.
I told the President that I will be working hard for the next month to earn the right to represent Canada in those discussions to get the best deal for Canada under the new U.S. approach. At the same time, Canada must be looking elsewhere to expand our trade, to build our economy, and to protect our sovereignty. Canada is ready to take a leadership role in building a coalition of like-minded countries who share our values. We believe in international cooperation. We believe in the free and open exchange of goods, services, and ideas. And if the United States no longer wants to lead, Canada will. I told the President that I will be working hard for the next month.
I don't know how Canada leads on international trade without the United States. We have things people want, right? But we have absolutely no expertise in international trade, it seems, right? We let the United States take hold. Who are you going to send? Mel Joly? Come on. He does send Mel Joly. Spoiler alert. It's at the end here. Anyway, Gov.exe is responding to Mark Carney, and he says, Mark Carney says he talked to European leaders and they want to do business with Canada because we have everything the world wants. So Mark Carney wants to divorce the United States and align with Europe. This guy's a real piece of work. Yeah, it is. This is another minute 13 of the same thing we just watched, so I'm not going to play it. But I don't think that this is a viable plan. People are responding saying the amount of, here it is. We trade 8 to 12% with Europe and 76% with the United States. Carney will bankrupt us. Yeah. Like, it's not a good plan. It's a really bad plan. It's a really, really bad plan. And if you want to increase trade with Europe, great. Let's not exclude the United States because they buy 76% of our stuff. Like, come on. Here's Mel Joly going out to Europe to expand trade with France and Germany. Mel Joly says, I'm putting my campaign on hold to ensure Canada's voice is heard at important sessions on peace and security at NATO. So she's hanging out with Rutte and there's Rubio, right? So the U.S. Secretary of State's there. Mel Joly again says, France and Germany are close allies. Canada must seize this opportunity to strengthen our collective defense alongside our European partners. Germany is trying to ban the ADF from being participating in their parliament, their legislature, as far as I understand it. And France just got rid of Marine Le Pen for 5 years, saying, yeah, she can't win. She's going to jail. So they're doing to Le Pen what the United States did to Trump, perhaps more effectively. It seems like Le Pen I haven't heard anything about her mounting a counter anything at this point in time, no appeal or anything like that. So I have no idea. And I don't know that an appeal would be effective. So I don't know what's going on with that, but I don't want to align with country that's making steps in that direction, because even if you get close to fixing things by, becoming the president and then, pulling a Malai or a Trump or whatever it is, Boucle, they'll remove you because they'll say, oh, well, this is not what we want. And then people just say, oh, okay, right? Like, what are you going to do then? Protest? And then you go to jail, just like Tamara Litch and Chris Barber, right? Unless you're protesting what the government wants, like, putting up fiery debris in front of trains, or Black Lives Matter, but no other lives matter, right? Like, these things, it's very interesting. Anyway, here's Trump. And this is the stuff on what Trump is actually trying to achieve. Tariffs are not the end goal. They're a starter pistol. And Tanvi says Trump's new tariffs aren't a trade tweak. They're the first move in a full spectrum reset. $9.2 trillion in debt matures in 2025, meaning it has to be renegotiated, and remortgaged. Inflation lingers. Alliances are shifting. Also, this $9.2 trillion in debt maturing in 25, that's a control mechanism. So, like, you come in as president, or you come in as a new prime minister or something like that, and then somebody says, sir, we've got $9.2 trillion in debt turning over this year, and the interest rates are 10% higher than they were the last time this happened. And so what do you want to do? And so like, unless you have a plan for that, that could overwhelm you. You know what I mean? Like if you've ever had a plan and you're like, okay, today I'm going to get X done. And then you start on that thing and it doesn't work. And you're like building my robot and it didn't work. Right. And it took me an extra day and I was like, oh my gosh, throws you off. And people who can't adapt will just freeze. A lot of people fight or flight, right? And some people run away. Some people just freeze and they don't do anything. Joe Biden froze, right? And so Trump had a plan. And he's rolling out his plan to deal with that in a way that is proactive, I guess. But if you are a person who thinks you're dealing with one problem and you get thrown a curveball of this massive debt that's maturing and you have to raise taxes to deal with the offsets of this, and you say, well, why can't we just print money? And well, that option's not available to you right now, sir. There's no emergency and this and that and really blah, 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 blah. We should deal with this with taxes. And all of your advisors say this is it's like declaring bankruptcy, sir. It's a control mechanism. Now you can't focus on your policy that you wanted, that you got elected on. Now you have to deal with this $9.2 trillion debt. And then they're at midterms. Right? And if you deal with the debt wrong, oh my gosh, government shutdown. Oh my gosh, government shutdown and a half, right? So like it's a control mechanism and they tried to use it and Trump's just sloughing it off. He's like, I don't care. Do whatever you're going to do. We've got this plan. So carrying on. Tanvi says, start with the debt. 9.2 trillion must be refinanced in 25. If rolled into 10-year bonds, every 1 basis point drops in rates. Every 1 basis point drop in rates saves approximately $1 billion a year. So a 0.5% drop would see $500 billion over a decade. Lower yields free up fiscal room. Without them, core spending gets crowded out. How to push yields down with sticky inflation and cautious Fed? Manufacture uncertainty. So the fog of war that Trump created was on purpose to drive the interest rates down. Sweep in with tariffs, spook the markets, trigger risk off. Money exits the stocks, floods into long-term treasuries. A deliberate detox to cool the economy and cut refinancing costs. But cheap refinancing isn't enough on its own. Even at lower rates, the debt remains enormous. That's where the next lever comes in, cutting the deficit. Elon Musk and Doge are cutting $4 billion per day. At that pace, they'd shave off $1 trillion by the end of September 25, if not May. That might be optimistic, but I don't know. And the rate of this cutting has other issues that she's not going into, but I'll leave that just as an aside. Tanvi says, with these savings, the big economic pillars to successfully deliver on Secretary Scott Bessent's 333 plan is to get growth up. Tariffs come in as a trigger for domestic industrial revival. The thinking is, by making imports expensive, you create room for U.S. producers to step in. But here's the problem. American factories haven't scaled up overnight. So in the short term, consumers will face higher prices. The administration knows this. That's why they're front-loading the pain now, betting that by 26, the benefits will be visible. In the meantime, they're offering some near-term relief. Tax cuts have already been floated to help offset the cost burdens on households. And while risky, currency devaluation may follow later to make imports cheaper without lifting tariffs. Don't forget, tariffs also bring in revenue. Estimates suggest that they could raise over $700 million within the first year. That's off American citizens, by the way, or companies paying off the tariffs on behalf of the American citizens. That's not a game changer on its own, but it gives Treasury a bit more room to maneuver, especially if paired with deficit cuts. Still, the approach isn't without risks. If domestic supply chains don't catch up, or if global retaliation kicks in, inflation could rise again. And if that happens, the Fed may be forced to raise rates, which would blow a hole in the low yield plan. That's the tightrope. A common critique is why impose tariffs before building out the capacity to replace imports, but that assumes tariffs are the end goal. They're not. They're the starting gun, a way to force movement both inside the U.S. and around the world. See, Trump needs a lever. He can't just tell people to do things. He can't say, I'm the president of the United States, do this. Because they'll be like, okay, buddy, like you're not the president of my country, so get effed, right? But he says, okay, you can do what I say or your country's economy is going to be destroyed. And now he's got leverage. Now he has a reason for them to listen to him, right? And they will. So back to this, which brings us to geopolitics. Before tariffs, Trump's team signaled a global order reset, pulling back from NATO, cooling EU ties, and opening diplomatic space with Russia, Saudi Arabia, etc. Tariffs now serve as a leverage to renegotiate terms based on American first policy. Expect a lot of bilateral deals in the coming months. Tariffs will be lowered for countries that offer strategic concessions on trade, security, or industrial policy. Those that resist, they'll pay higher costs until they decide to come to the table. China is the focal point. Observers have long argued China isn't a poor country. It's a wealthy, high-capacity state that floods markets with exports. Its currency keeps its currency artificially low. Tariffs could be used to force big moves like currency appreciation by China. Lines will be redrawn with other allies too. Europe may be pushed to cut exposure to China or negotiate on Ukraine. India may be forced to cut tariffs and move closer to U.S. alignment. Mexico and Canada could face demands to crack down on fentanyl trafficking routes. In the U.S. economy, there will be clear winners and losers. Steel, autos, and textiles are likely to benefit, industries that form Trump's political base. But tech, retail, and construction sectors more reliant on imports could take a hit, especially in swing states. That's the political gamble. If jobs return fast enough in key states and inflation remains under control, the tariffs may look like a bold but effective move. If prices spike and job creation lags, the strategy could backfire by November 26. The Wisconsin seat loss was a warning. Less than 18 months to show results for midterms. Voters don't respond to state grams or state gems. They respond to prices, jobs, and narratives. FDR had fireside chats. Reagan had Morning in America. Trump needs a similar consistent messaging to Americans. So here's the big picture. Lower yields ease the debt wall. Spending cuts restore fiscal discipline. Tariffs jumpstart domestic growth. And geopolitics gets rewritten in America's favor. It's disruption by design with enormous stakes. If it works, it's a defining success. Debt under control, manufacturing reborn, global leverage restored, Trumpism vindicated in 2026. If it fails, inflation, retaliation, lost midterms, strategic drift. 18 months to find out if the gamble pays off. Yeah, I think that she's not wrong. I think that that's pretty accurate, honestly. So we'll see. And Trump is playing poker, and he's playing poker and chess at the same time. And I was at a mall one time playing Chess Master, and he was walking around, and that's what Trump is doing. He's individually playing poker with each different country, but also playing poker with the whole world, and he's all in, and he's standing there, and the world can't believe it, and nobody's holding even a pair, and it looks like Trump's got a boat, right? And you're just like, what? And nobody can believe it, and that's why you see all of the disarray, because Trump's pushed it all in the middle, and he's dead serious, and he's sitting there sipping his Diet Coke, waiting for the next person to make their move, and everybody's terrified because they know they all have to fold. They have to, because he's won, and they know it because they don't have the cards, and he does, and he's sitting there waiting. There you go. Juno News is reporting Poilievre proposed expediting trade negotiations with the United States, and this is something I haven't heard before, unilaterally pausing tariffs between each country until a new Canadian-U.S.-Mexico agreement could be struck. So USMCA. Interesting. That's different from Poilievre. So Juno News is reporting this as well, and it's just a little bit. He says, I reported on it yesterday from Mario, but I don't think it was as clear as the write-up from Juno here, so I'll just clean it up a bit. Poilievre laid out his three-part plan of what he would do immediately after winning the election, how he would tackle the dispute afterwards, and his long-term plan to build Canada's economy so that it would not be reliant on the U.S. going forward. On day one as Prime Minister, I will propose to the President to accelerate renegotiations to replace USMCA, bring in a new deal on trade and security. USMCA must be renegotiated next year regardless. He said it's not if, but when, so why not get it done fast? He said he would set a firm deadline to finalize the deal and propose that both countries pause tariffs both ways until such an agreement is met. He also said there would be red lines of what his government would not give up during the negotiations. Right. So interesting, and we'll see how that all plays out. Rebel News is reporting that, well, here's Poilievre talking about Trump. I don't like this. I would much prefer the Juno News version of Poilievre than this version, but here we go.
No, I don't consider the Americans to be a reliable trade partner right now. Their president has chosen to betray America's best friend and closest ally. I'm saddened to say that because I love the American people. But there's no denying that there is a president right now who consistently betrays the Canadian people and shows that he has been unreliable to deal with. We can't control the president. Nobody can. We're learning that today, despite the very unrealistic expectations that certain people tried to make, the very unrealistic promises that people were making right up until today. What we can control is what we do at home.
We'll just leave it there. it's interesting, and we'll see how this whole Trump tariff situation works out. I mean, Canada needs to stand on our own 2 feet. And if we don't stand on our own 2 feet, then the politicians have wasted an opportunity. Scott Moe says, when you impose tariffs, the country that suffers the most is your own. Americans are waking up to that reality this morning as they see billions of dollars wiped off their retirement savings. Soon, that will be followed by high inflation and job losses across the U.S. Canada should not make the same mistake. It's interesting that Scott Moe seems to be cheering for the failure of this plan. Also, Tim Poole highlights this. On CNN, Trump is orange. On Fox, he is not. So isn't that interesting? They're changing the color of the president's skin on CNN. Isn't that weird? Orange man bad. Like, wild. I mean, that's they have a face-changing app on CNN? Jeepers creepers. The manipulation is absolutely off the charts. We have to say goodbye to the stream really soon, but I want to give you a quick update. Yesterday, I reported that there was an OnlyFans model on the campaign bus with Jagmeet Singh. Well, now she's been fired because apparently she has hateful comments, disrespectful comments about the Holocaust. You can't make this up. This is just funny. Canada Proud is reporting the OnlyFans porn star who joined Jagmeet Singh on the campaign trail has been dropped by the NDP over disrespectful comments about the Holocaust. Weird. Absolutely hilarious, right? And here's the National Post article if you want to read more about what she said about the Holocaust. I don't actually care all that much. And this picture, I saw this picture and I thought, there's no way that's real. And then everybody picked this picture up. I think this is a real picture. And Stephen Taylor says this is the last known picture of the NDP before it disappeared forever. So it's Jagmeet Singh with two dog things. I don't know what they are. I don't know. They're wearing dog head things. And I don't think those are classified as furries. They're not very furry, but I could be wrong about that. I don't know. Regardless, apologies to furries if those aren't furries. They're dog things. And Jagmeet Singh, I don't know what I thought the OnlyFans porn star was the bottom of the barrel, but I'm disappointed to learn that we're still scraping, and there's still things to come up from the bottom of that barrel. My gosh. We've got the CPC, LPC, PPC, election news, and a whole bunch of other stuff coming up for the rest of the show. But unfortunately, we've got to say goodbye to the stream. So thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll catch you tomorrow. And for everybody else, we'll carry on with this. Globe and Mail is reporting Pierre Poilievre has a woman problem. And I was like, not as bad as whatever the heck's going on with Jagmeet Singh here, man. My gosh, what eyebrow-raising weird thing. Like, if you're a politician and these two show up, you're like, I'm not going to take a picture with you guys. Can you guys get these dog things out of here? Like, what is happening? No, that's a hard no for me, dog. Move on. Ha, right? Okay, Steven Tyler again. Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for watching. This is just a short version of a longer show. If you'd like to get the whole show, you can go over to CanadaPoly.com and sign up for a subscription. Just look in the drop-down tab for Shop and Donate and look for subscriptions, and you'll get immediate access to the full show. Love to see you. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a wonderful, wonderful